All right, let's just jump right in. We're looking at a really fundamental shift that's happening right now. And this is all based on some pretty explosive reports coming out of February 2026. See, the whole era of just, renting your AI from big tech, that might actually be coming to an end. What we're talking about here is a huge move toward owning your own digital brain and running it right on your own machine. This is the sovereign AI revolution. But hey, let's make this real for a second. Does any of this sound familiar to you? You sign up for one AI service, then maybe another one, and then another, and before you know it, you're staring at your bank statement with that feeling, what the reports are calling subscription fatigue. I mean, you're shelling out a ton of money every single month, but what are you really getting for it? And, maybe more importantly, what are you giving up? And here's the really uncomfortable truth behind all of this. Every single time you use one of those cloud-based AIs, every brilliant prompt you come up with, every piece of sensitive data you ask it to analyze, well, it's not actually yours. Nope. It's being logged, it's being processed, and ultimately it's owned by some giant corporation. You think you're just renting a tool, but what you're really doing is handing over your own intellectual property. So, here's the game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to tackle why the old model is just breaking down. We're calling it escaping the AI rent trap. Then we'll get into the amazing new AI models that are making all this possible. After that, we'll look at the hardware powering the whole thing, how you can actually build your own sovereign stack, and finally, we're going to zoom out and see why this is truly a fight for our digital future. Okay, let's kick things off with part one, escaping the AI rent trap. And really what we're going to focus on here is why the current cloud-based subscription model is just hitting a wall, especially for the power users out there, the folks who really depend on these tools day in and day out. So the problem really starts with cold, hard cash. I mean, by early 2026, if you were a power user of the top-tier models from, Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, you were consistently shelling out between $100 and $200 a month. A month. That's, over $2,000 a year just to get access to the best tools? It's not just expensive, it's totally unsustainable, and it creates this massive dependency. And that dependency, right there, is the very definition of the rent trap. Look, this isn't just about the money. It's a whole system where you're just trapped, perpetually paying for access, while you sacrifice three absolutely critical things: cost efficiency, the privacy of your data, and your control over the tool itself. I mean, when you put them side by side, the difference is it's stark. With the rented AI, your data is corporate property, plain and simple. With sovereign AI, you control it. The cost? It's a never-ending subscription versus a one-time hardware purchase. And maybe the biggest one of all, you go from these mandatory sanitized content filters to complete and total freedom, full customization. The choice, well, it becomes pretty obvious, doesn't it? So the big question is, how is this whole revolution even possible? Well, it all comes down to a brand new generation of AI models. And look, we're not just talking about something that's a little bit better than last year's version. No way. These things represent a fundamental, massive leap in what's possible. Okay, so the first huge breakthrough is this concept from Anthropic called adaptive thinking, which they rolled out in Claude 4.6. Now, think about it like this. An AI might use the same amount of brain power to answer a simple question like, what's 2 plus 2, as it does to find a complex security flaw in a million lines of code. It's just not efficient. With adaptive thinking, the AI can actually decide how hard it needs to think for any given task. It's allocating its own resources on the fly. It starts to behave less like a static tool and a lot more like an autonomous employee. And this is not just some theory on a whiteboard. This is real. In what they call red team security tests, that's where you hire experts to try and break your system, they basically unleashed Claude 4.6 on some critical infrastructure code. And get this, with zero human prompting, it independently found over 500 high-severity, previously unknown vulnerabilities. That's an AI acting like a world-class security researcher all by itself. Now, of course, OpenAI wasn't just going to sit back and watch. They fired back with GPT-5.3 Codex and this incredible feature they call mid-turn steering. And if you're a developer, this is a total game changer. Just imagine, the AI is deep in the middle of this massive, complex refactor across like dozens of files. And with this, you can just jump in right in the middle of it and say, whoa, hold on, change this parameter, or hey, do this part a little differently. And it just adjusts on the fly, without having to scrap the whole thing and start from scratch. It's a wild level of real-time control. And what all this data really shows is that these models are starting to specialize. You can see it right here. On a benchmark for really complex terminal operations, GPT-5.3 Codex just absolutely crushes it. But, like we just talked about, Claude 4.6 is the king of autonomous research, so we're really entering this new era of specialized AI tools. And the best part? You're going to be able to run them yourself. Which, of course, brings us perfectly to our third section, your personal AI supercomputer. Because let's be honest, these incredible new software models are basically useless if you don't have the hardware to actually run them on. And that's where the hardware revolution comes in. I mean, listen to this. We are now talking about running models with over 400 billion parameters locally on your own machine. Just think of parameters as all the little internal knobs that tune an AI's knowledge and its skills. So models this big, they are truly monstrous. We're talking data center scale AI. Just a couple of years ago, the idea that you could run something like this on a machine sitting on your desk, that was pure science fiction. So how on earth is this even possible? Well, the magic word you need to know is quantization, and specifically this crazy breakthrough called 1.58-bit quantization. The easiest way to think about it is like a super efficient compression algorithm, but for AI models. It just shrinks their memory footprint so dramatically that one of these 400 billion parameter monsters can now squeeze onto consumer hardware that has somewhere between 128 and 192 gigs of unified memory. It's incredible. And, this whole technological shift has kind of found its champion hardware. The source report puts it perfectly, saying that machines like Apple's high-memory Mac Studios have become the unofficial server of the rebellion for all the AI enthusiasts out there. I mean, what a great phrase. They're the affordable, accessible hardware that's empowering everyone from hobbyists to pros to finally break free from the cloud and declare their digital independence. Okay, that brings us to Section 4, the Sovereign Stock Unlocked. So we've talked about the amazing new software. We've talked about the revolutionary hardware. Now, let's put it all together and see what this actually looks like in the real world. And this really lays out the roadmap. It's surprisingly straightforward. Step 1, you get the hardware, something with that 128 plus gigs of memory. Step 2, you download one of these massive open source models like Llama 4, which, by the way, is a huge reason any of this is possible. Step 3, you use those quantization tools we talked about to compress it, to make it fit. And then step 4, you just run it. And boom, you've got complete data privacy and total control right there on your own desk. And if you're not convinced yet, just look at the money. The economic payoff is absolutely staggering. So the report compares the typical API cost for processing 1 million tokens, think of tokens as just pieces of words, at about $10. Okay, $10. Now, when you run one of these quantized models locally with all that insane efficiency, that cost plummets to just 15 cents. That's not a small savings. That's not incremental. It is astronomical. And all of this brings us to our final section, the fight for our future. Because look, this is so much bigger than just a cool tech trend for hobbyists. The question of who owns and who controls AI, this has become one of the most critical societal conflicts of our time. Seriously. And really, what we're seeing are two completely opposing philosophies clashing. On one side, you've got surveillance AI, right? Systems like DeFlock, which are all about centralized monitoring and control by either corporations or the state. But on the other side, you have this DeFlock movement, and its goal is to use AI for the exact opposite reason, to create anonymity, to empower individuals. The whole point isn't to collect data, it's to obscure it. And make no mistake, the stakes are getting higher and higher. This quote from a 2026 ACLU privacy report just makes it chillingly clear. It says, as CEOs label activists terrorists, the question of who owns the sensors and the models becomes a physical reality. I mean, wow. Suddenly that abstract question about who owns the AI models becomes a very, very real question of who's being watched, who's being tracked, and who actually has the power to push back. So this is where we land, this entire massive shift from the insane cost of subscriptions to the power of these new models, all the way to this fight for privacy. It all just boils down to one single fundamental choice. In this new age of AI, are you going to be a tenant, forever paying rent on your own thoughts? Or are you going to be a sovereign and own your intelligence outright? The choice is increasingly yours to make.